I'm Terri Malik.
And I'm Jared Treadway, and we're inviting you to co-create with us.
From our home base in North Central Texas.
We're hosting conversations that nourish our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual intelligence.
We are about being spiritually physical.
And physically spiritual.
We are about inspiration.
And aspiration.
We are about involution.
And evolution. We're about self-exploration
and self-excavation. We are about each of us coming to know ourselves in our fullness and wholeness,
so that together we serve the expansion of human consciousness
with the gifts of our specific genius.
Welcome to 33 North, 96 West.
Greetings, Terri, and to everyone, and welcome to this episode of 33 North, 96 West. And I wanted to remind us, for the benefit of our older, more established audience and anyone new who may ever join us in this field, why it's called 33 North, 96 West. I think we may need to do that from time to time. So those are the latitudinal and longitudinal coordinates of this place from where we are broadcasting our signal. So we're here in North Central Texas in Sherman, and it's at 33 degrees north latitude and 96 degrees west longitude. And for any of you who have given any thought to the magic and the substance of number in terms of quality, not about quantity, but number that tells story, you'll know that those numbers are magic.
3, 6, and 9.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very special numbers. So, Terri, true or false? What is your intuition telling you? We're in a time of tremendous evolution, involution, change.
True.
True. Do we need to know what's going on? Do we know what's going on? How do we be in these times? What do we do?
Well, my first answer, thought, intuition that came in is you actually answered your question with the word be. Of course, we will discuss maybe what and how that looks, but it really is being in this now moment, and this now moment, and this now moment. And previously, we had conversation about time. Time is malleable. Energy is malleable. All energy is malleable, and time is energy. And that we have the choice. We can live in the past. We can live in the future. We can live in both of those and let the past influence the future. Or we can really come back to the present, the being in the moment, and let that be the beautiful unfolding that it will be without the levels and layers of experience. Not saying those don't influence us, but we don't have to create the story and put it on repeat. So maybe that's a start that is trying to come through me.
That's a great start. Yes. So what I would like to say is that time is a construct on which we collectively agree so that we can be here and be in relationship with one another. And so in some ways it's useful. Like, Terri, you're coming to record at 10 a.m. today.
Yes.
So it's just a construct of shared agreement. But in many ways, we have endowed it with more density maybe than is required. And with regards to like what you said about the malleability of time and I'm going to bring in the dynamic of past, present, and future, because we think about our experience in a sequence of moments that we call time. And we have experiences, and then we codify our experiences with meaning, and then they become like memories. And because we remember things from the past moments, we call them into the present moment. And by remembering them and remembering them in a particular way, we reclaim that energy in our present. Do we have to do that?
We do not. And I'm actually even hearing maybe another question too to go with that is, maybe I want to make it as a statement. What is coming through is to discuss linear time, not in sitting here and scientifically defining it necessarily, but that is our experience. We experience it as linear. Therefore, yes, past memories say that if you do action A, result B is going to happen. Mm-hmm. If you do, and et cetera, et cetera. So because of that deeply ingrained experience, perspective, and interpretation of time as being only linear, if we only look at it as linear, then of course that will be our experience. It will always be past, present, and future.
Right. So what's the alternative? Are you suggesting... Let me be clear. We're suggesting that time is and memory and even the idea of the future is malleable to the consciousness we have now. True statement?
Yes. And this just brought up something I heard the other day. I really appreciated this, the way this was framed, and I'm hesitating and using the because I'm trying to recall it. So let me just see if I can speak to it in my own interpretation. For quite some time, I remember my epiphany aha moment of going, oh my gosh, time is a spiral. Mm-hmm. I mean, just that epiphany alone several years ago, so what I would do, I actually had a program where I would draw a spiral, and then I would intersect from the outside of the spiral into the center, just one line. And I'm trying to give a visual because sometimes that's easier for me to explain. So I would draw that and show that, okay, we're on this spiral, and then we're going to have something happen at one of those points on that line through the spiral. And we can interpret that as traumatic, for example. And I also would always tell people and continue to tell people what we interpret as trauma does not need to be based off an external definition of that or someone else's interpretation of trauma. It can be, I remember reading a story one time about a child that was just so traumatized because he couldn't have chocolate chip cookies with his milk. And I give a very light example, but he talked about when he became an adult, how that still impacted him, that he did not have choice. So something as small as what might seem small can become something very big. So again, keep in mind trauma is anything you interpret it to be for you in that moment, which means it's something that's undesirable, uncomfortable, feels like it takes away your own power and choice. So when you come back around on that spiral to that same point, it's a different point in the spiral, but it's the same line. You really kind of have a choice point. Okay, I can remember what happened at this point back here, and I can, and as we call it back here, because we're again still interpreting it as linear, and I can translate that as, okay, because again, how did I say it earlier? Situation A happened and result B must happen. Oh. And that's my own explanation. And the recent explanation I heard was, gosh, I was really wanting to articulate it and I don't recall it exactly, but it had something to do with that she really used the analogy of a line, and I can't remember her phrase, but so I just went back to my old example, but it's like a bridge. That's not, again, what she called it, but I'm going to try to translate the energy of what she was getting across. It's a bridge, and we really do get to choose how we cross that bridge.
And may I suggest the spiral analogy can be understood from the aspect of the individual and also the collective?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
as our species, as the body of Gaia, as humanity is experiencing its own evolution as one body, we have a spiral trajectory. We have been on an evolutionary path. We have experienced some pretty profound shifts in the past. Some of these are encoded in myths, like the idea of a great flood or cataclysm or, big change. So just as an individual has those moments where the spiral is sort of crossing the bridge point and you have the opportunity to reframe or shift paradigm or shift perspective, the body of our species has the same opportunity, or the body of the planet, or the body of the universe, at whatever level we decide to approach. And so I'd like to steer the conversation in the direction of let's imagine, for the purposes of the conversation today, that something that humanity as a body has already called something new and profoundly different into our experience. And at one level, it's already manifest. So, based on our past experiences, we have put out rockets of desire for something new, a new direction, a new way, a new experience. And that is manifest and available. But we're sort of in this in-between place. Some of us are clinging to the past, perpetuating old ways of being, perpetuating old systems, clinging to it because it gives some sense of safety at some level. And then there are others of us who are beginning to realize the potential of this new thing that is available, that's manifest. And we're like, hey, come on. And a lot of what we're experiencing now, individually and collectively, is maybe, for the purposes of our conversation today, the releasing of the past density that has been claimed. It's kind of like a pimple bursting. I know that's gross. Or a boil being lanced. And some of those two analogies I have received from the brilliant Paul Selig. Like, in order for the healing to occur and the new thing to be totally embodied and real in our experience, you have to go through some of that stuff. And so now we're looking at all this stuff and we're like, what is going on here? And what's the attitude that we're supposed to have about all this stuff? Are we supposed to get all bent out of shape about it? What's the meaning we can endow it with? And that's another level of the conversation. Like, I think you sort of alluded to this concept or suggested it, but what do we do as we kind of have this idea of the new, brilliant, wonderful evolution that's coming, that we're rising into, but the past is still here, and we're in this weird spot in between all of it, and we're dealing with all of this stuff. What do we do?
Another analogy you may have seen or heard or read out there that I've actually been witnessing for several years, but I've noticed it's become more prevalent on social media, for example, is the cracking open.
Yeah.
It's another, I just wanted to frame that for those who might feel that or might be interpreting that as their experience, just this massive cracking open. In order, as you said, in order for the release of what is usually how we say it, we being just those who work with energy, if you will, is what's not serving. And some of the writings and speaking and so forth I've been doing over the last few days, and that have transmissions, if you will, that have moved through me really strongly, have talked about really panning out with this bird's eye view and being the observer and the witness rather than just the engager, and seeing, what you're discussing, this, what many are calling new earth, new world, there's so many words you could put to it. This, of course, goes beyond, as Jared has already alluded to, this is going way beyond just a personal, individual experience. Very, very collective, very global and beyond. And when we are able to kind of have that bird's eye view and see a bigger picture and see the different moving parts, the different fractals, if you will, in my perspective and experience for self and others, it really does take a lot of the depth and density of seriousness out of the equation when we are able to do that for ourselves and say, okay, this isn't me, Terri Malik, personally having this experience, this trauma, this replay of trauma, this replay of story, this pattern. It really becomes, okay, what are we collectively clearing out? What are we collectively transmuting? What are we doing? And I just feel that gives us so much levity and permission to really feel the spiral of time rather than the linear density of that.
So beautiful. And so many wonderful ways to follow up and different directions we can go with the conversation from that point. First I'll say, I love the analogy of the cracking open. And if you think about a tiny acorn that becomes a giant oak tree,
Yeah.
I mean, the seed had to crack.
Yeah.
That was the vessel.
Mm.
And in order for the oak tree to become manifest, the seed had to be annihilated. It's reclaimed by the earth.
A new form,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Yes. Absolutely.
I also love the idea of giving oneself permission to have the broader view, the bird's eye view, as you suggested. And I'm going to introduce the words expanded awareness or expanded consciousness. And there's sort of a relationship, at least in my mind. I think it's in my mind, yes. As expansion as being a little bit horizontal. So expanding your awareness horizontally as opposed to ascension, which is a sort of vertical increase of awareness, which is a slightly different thing. So the bird's eye view, the broader view, it's like, for instance, if we use the analogy of humanity being in a valley between where we've come from and where we're going to, it's like some of us want to crawl up on the next mountaintop and kind of shine our lantern and say, hey, come on, it's time to move. And some of us are clinging to the old mountain, and some of us are hanging out in the valley and don't know what to do. The idea of levity, I'm just gonna a little bit play devil's advocate and challenge you, Terri, us, for the purposes of this conversation. That seems dangerous and arrogant. Like, who am I to claim lightness and levity amidst all of this pain and suffering that I'm observing in my experience? That's just not right.
So the philosopher in me wants to answer a question with a question. And then, of course, I will have conversation beyond that. Who are you to not?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So we agree. Of course, I was playing devil's advocate, but we agree that every human being is endowing all of their experience with meaning. Can we agree with that?
Yes, and I just have to give huge accolades to Jared for that phrase, that evolved today.
from
Beautiful.
our pre-production conversation.
Beautiful.
So you are doing this, whether you have acknowledged it consciously or not. But every experience that you have, you are the agent that endows it with whatever meaning. And along with that, you have the capacity to rise into a space of choice. We've spoken of this before. And it can be really tough sometimes to look at things that you in the past have perceived as being terrible or awful, very dense. And it can be tough to look at those things and claim a different meaning. But you can do it. And we're gonna try to reach into that concept and see if we realize any beautiful or profound or effective ways to communicate this concept to you. But matter does not have to be heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Our experience here does not have to be nearly as dense as we have claimed in the past. While Terri and I both agree that something new is already manifest and available, I think those are the words that I want to use. We are not separate from the process of bringing that into form. So we have a role to play in tuning ourselves to the frequency of that thing that's coming. And it's all tied up in this idea of claiming what is ours. Like endowing meaning, claiming density, or claiming levity, or claiming what's coming, or claiming where we've come from and re-manifesting it. That was a spiral for you.
Yes. From a observer, witness, bird's eye view perspective, and I mentioned transmissions just for sake of putting a word to it, that have come through so strongly as of late, is that as a whole, what we are doing is allowing the crumbling of not only systems, individual systems, but the very concept, the very idea, the very inception of systems. So, and I am going to bring this back down to not just a bird's eye view, meaning the density comes from a result of having been a product as a species of systems since the beginning of humanity.
Yes.
And so again, going back to having the bird's eye view, you can see that, okay, I am a product of this as a human, but I am also a product of God, source, creator, spirit. I am divine. And marrying those two and being able to be in this physicality, in this vessel, in this space of being physically human, physically spiritual, and spiritually physical. In other words, not taking the physicality out, but also not taking out the spirituality, being able to pan out and say, I am both. And so again, if I see that, okay, systems themselves, individual systems are crumbling, but it goes way beyond that. And one thing I shared yesterday on a live I did is we are not just, there's a lot of information out there, various sources saying certain systems are crumbling. And my invitation to people is consider perhaps that the very concept of systems are crumbling. And of course, we're going to feel that we're going to viscerally feel that. We're going to experience that as a human in all those levels. And remembering that we are not just engaging, but we are also witnessing, and be able to pan out and say, okay, maybe this is a part of systems as a whole crumbling. And when I say systems, I'm being called to try to expand upon that. And I think definitely Jared's going to be able to help me with that. Is that the word structure is coming in.
Yes.
So if energy is malleable and time is malleable, our systems malleable, our structures malleable, are the very ideas and concepts that we have created malleable.
Brilliant. Yes. I would also like to ask, was your consciousness present at the creation of the systems that are now crumbling? The answer is yes.
Yes.
Yes. So
yes.
I just want to, I think throughout today's conversation, I'm always wanting to bring us back to an understanding of our eternal journey, our eternal nature beyond linear time. Because it's really easy to observe the crumbling of a structure or a system and be afraid, and to begin to want to cast blame. I'm a victim of a system. It's hard for me to even say those words, but let's say there's a financial system or a political system. I'm a victim of these things that these people are doing, or the what the system is imposing. What does that claim do for you? First, what does it do for you to claim victimhood in that situation? That's one question. But then second, remind yourself, please, of your eternal nature, and as your role, your privilege, to be a citizen of the species. And the energy that is animating this incarnation for us individually and collectively was present at the founding of these systems that we are now inviting to evolve. So in some cases, I think it may look or feel like the system is crumbling. In some other cases, it may feel like the structure or the system is being brought into the light or being remade, where the dense, heavy stuff sort of gets sloughed off and the system has some truth in it that it can hold in the new paradigm. And then in some cases, we're going to realize we don't need that at all anymore. From the new paradigm, the system from the past is completely irrelevant. And we're being a little bit vague, but you can apply these questions to systems at all levels.
So I want to bring this into a little bit, talking about being vague. You discussing such concepts, right? Really has to go too vague to go back to specific, because of the just in the conversation and in an understanding or expression of it. So to further discuss what you were just saying, you said, talking about we could choose the density of a system and so forth. Another thing that was coming through me is that we often find it easier if we interpret and witness a system is crumbling that maybe is not a system we would like to be a part of. The question is, are we finding another system to cling to? Are we finding another existing system to cling to? Because that therein lies why the pattern is there. Rather than, again, having also the awareness that you not only are the engager, but the witness, and can say, the bigger picture perhaps is the way all systems have evolved is crumbling, which that's just another way of saying what you were saying. Probably not nearly articulated as well, but I wanted to personalize it. It's so easy to say, oh, I'm so glad that system's crumbling. I don't agree with it. It didn't serve me, and make it real 3D language. I witness that every day. I see people saying, oh, well, that it was time that needed to crumble. The question is it the concept as a whole that maybe perhaps?
Yes. So I understand where you're going, and I'm going to try to reframe from my perspective using slightly different language to see that we're on the same page, and then we can launch from there. So there are structures and systems at all levels of creation and all levels of consciousness. True statement?
Yes.
Okay, so we have some 3D earth realm structures and systems like governments, financial institutions and structures, religious or spiritual institutions and structures, social institutions and structures, those kinds of things. At different fractal levels and other levels of creation and consciousness, those structures and systems are informed by background, underlying, broader structures and systems. And then those structures and systems at higher and broader levels of creation are informed by other structures and systems. So what I think you're speaking to, Terri, is the potential of the transformation that we're experiencing now, even though it is definitely impacting us on this dense 3D level. But there are some fundamental structural shifts and changes behind the scenes in the matrix of creation that we are now experiencing. How's that for a way to express that?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Now, so if all this sounds like science fiction to you, it's because maybe our movies have been prophetic lately.
So Terri and I were having so much fun with this conversation that we went for almost 2 hours. So for your benefit, we have taken the liberty of dividing this episode up into 2 parts for you so that you can listen episodically if you'd like. So this represents the conclusion of part 1, and then we will publish part 2, and we're publishing them both together. So if you'd like to continue listening, you can just click on through to the next episode. As always, thank you for being a part of this, and I'll see you on the other side.